He's elected prosecutor Dan Satterberg. It's good to see you. We appreciate you being here.
Good morning.
It's a hard debate because I think on both sides there are so many emotions involved and people feel so strongly one way or the other. And it's kind of back in this cycle because of the governor granting this reprieve. We had one of the 9 who died on Sunday. And you have in the past asked this to be addressed. How would you like to see this debate be addressed?
Well, it's interesting because from a national perspective, this is also an unsettled area. I mean, we had in the election last fall 3 states, California, Nebraska, and Oklahoma, where the people did vote to keep their death penalty despite evidence that shows how slow the process is and how costly and how litigious it is. The people still reinforce their support for that public policy. I think here in Washington State, what the prosecutors asked for last year was for the people to once again be allowed to vote on it, because I think we want to know before we go down this road of capital litigation, which can take 20 years from the time a person's convicted until the time that they're executed. And we want to know whether we have the public support to do it.
So you do believe that this should go to a vote of the people, and they thumbs up, thumbs down, do we keep the death penalty? In
1980, the people of the state of Washington voted by initiative to have a death penalty. And in that 37 years intervening, we've had 2 contested executions. So we don't do it very well here. It's been very expensive and very slow, but it's still the law on the books in the state of Washington. And as your setup piece shows, these are outrageous cases.
Yeah.
The 2 men on death row from King County killed 7 women and children in their separate cases.
And that's my question here, because if this goes to the voters and the voters turn it down and say we don't want the death penalty anymore, there's a very good chance that these 8 men who sit on death row, 2 of whom are King County cases from your office, might get a chance to live. I mean, these are child rapists, child killers. You have a serial killer out of Spokane, the worst of the worst cases. Do you think that the people, after they were found guilty by a jury of their peers, do you think the people should have a chance to weigh in on the cases that have already been adjudicated and decided that these men should be put to death?
Well, part of the frustration is, of course, that juries do render verdicts. They work very hard with this profound moral question about whether someone should live or die. They render a verdict of death, and then 20 years goes by before the courts are done with it, and in the interim, many of those cases get reversed for other reasons and have to go back to court. So it's a very frustrating process, and when people tell me they support the death penalty in Washington, I have to ask them, do you support the death penalty that we have or the one that you wish that we had? Because the one that we have is what it is. It's going to take a long time, cost a lot of money. The last 2 trials in King County that were capital cases one took almost 8 years to get over. That was the Carnation murders, and then one took more than 5 years. That was the execution of a Seattle police officer.
And millions of dollars.
And millions of dollars.
In taxpayer money. In the meantime, if this isn't sent to voters and a decision isn't made, and I don't have a whole lot of faith that if it's up to the state lawmakers that they can come to an agreement on anything or pass anything, but you're operating this really weird space. I mean, you have no shortage of aggravated, premeditated, first-degree murder cases where the death penalty is on the table in King County, unfortunately. But we have a governor who has granted a moratorium on the death penalty, which means no one will be put to death while he's in office. At the same time, you're still pursuing, in some cases, death penalty cases. So how does that factor into the decisions that you make?
So the moratorium that Governor Inslee announced several years ago and the reprieve that he announced last week, they don't change the law, and they actually don't even change the sentences for the individuals involved. It just basically kicks the can down the road for the next governor or governors in the future who might have a different view. So all the things that have been complained about, that it's too slow and too expensive, are actually made worse by the moratorium. It takes longer now because we know for the next 4 years we're not going to be able to carry out any sentences.
And it doesn't give anyone any definitive answers. So let me ask you this. If this goes to a vote of the people and we finally have a decision as to keeping the death penalty or losing it in the state of Washington, what do you think the people will decide?
You know, I think that as a public matter, there's still support in theory for the death penalty. And what I would hope is that if we had a referendum, we had a vote of the people, that we could talk about what it really means here in King County. Again, our process here, we've had 2 contested executions in 37 years. We only have 8 men left on death row. We're not like California where there's 700 or 800 people on death row. But we don't do it well here, and I think we have to look at what life in prison without possibility of release really means. That's also the death penalty. You go to prison, you die in prison, there's no possibility of release. And back in 1980 when we voted on this, a life sentence actually meant 14 years before parole. Today, life means a slow death penalty.
Yeah, I think either way, you're going to have very different feelings from 2 different sides of our state, and I hate to split it like that, and strong emotions. On one side, you have people who believe the death penalty is inhumane. On the other, you have people who believe that raping a child, killing people is inhumane as well. So, King County Prosecutor Dan Satterberg, we appreciate your insight on the issue, and we will look to see maybe if they take it up in this session or end up sending this issue to voters when I have you back on.
Thank you, Brandi.
Yep. Back to you guys.